Okay, everyone, so this is Dennis Nayer, the Director of Research, Development, and Training for the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. Right now I have the privilege of being here with the Deputy Executive Director of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Terrence Cunningham. Right now we're just going to have a brief open dialogue about some of the complexity of policing in this day and age. And we have one question that I'm going to ask Deputy Director Cunningham, and that is, with the complexities and dynamics confronting law enforcement today, what do you think are the most important needs for law enforcement in terms of training, policy, direction, and so forth?
Well, it's a pretty broad question, Dennis. Thanks.
I know.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and be here with the New York Chiefs. So I think, as most folks know, Dennis, I retired from Wellesley, Mass PD. I was the president of IACP last year, and I was a police chief for 17 years. And now I have this new opportunity working, directly with the folks in the field through IACP. I think what we found was last year, shortly after the Pulse nightclub shooting, myself and the executive director of IACP, Vince Tolucci, had a conversation about where IACP stands on gun-related issues, firearms issues. We took a stance back in the IACP took a stance back in 1994 when the original crime bill came out. And Vince and I, when we talked about it shortly after Pulse, we said, well, I'm sure that some of the positions of the chiefs may have evolved or changed since then. So we're going to do a survey and survey our membership to take a look and see just as it related to firearms issues where the field was. And then as we worked into the summer last summer, and you saw the shootings, the Sterling shooting and the Philando Castile shooting, then the Dallas officers, and then Baton Rouge. That's when Vince and I decided it was probably more appropriate for us to go out into the field and talk to the folks that are actually the practitioners that are out there doing the work, and see what the challenges are that they're facing. We at IACP think we know, but maybe we don't. So we certainly don't have all the answers. So we convened 8 listening tours last year around the country. And we went from Seattle to LA to Houston. We were in Orlando, Cincinnati, Detroit. When we did Detroit, we actually met with the folks from Canada as well. And we had put together a straw agenda just to say, okay, where do you stand on firearms-related issues, any issues related to, terrorism, use of force. I think marijuana was on there. We had like 4 issues. And it was very interesting as we traveled around and met with these law enforcement leaders. Clearly, the number one overarching issue facing the profession that we saw last year, and it seems to be the same this year, is dealing with folks afflicted with mental illness. And then related to that was also the homeless population, and trying to deal with the homeless population and the challenges, those very specific challenges, which clearly both of those aren't really law enforcement issues, but you deal with them every day, And then also what we heard from the field was recruitment and retention, and particularly given the environment that we're policing in today, and who wants to actually become a police officer and who wants to work nights and weekends and holidays and then be treated the way they are unfairly and through the media accounts. Be held completely accountable, put a camera on for 8 or 16 hours a day. No other profession does that. The doctors aren't doing it, superintendents of schools and teachers aren't doing it, nurses aren't doing it, but we expect our law enforcement officials to do it. So recruitment and retention is a huge issue for us. And it was interesting that we really didn't hear anything from the field related to terrorism. I think for the most part people feel like they've got the tools that are necessary, to protect their communities. But when you have the opportunity to go out and hear from so many folks that the mental illness overarching recruitment and retention, and then what you see is that these social issues that have been laid at the feet of the police. And that's one of the reasons now that when we talk about recruitment, we talk about recruiting. What type of individuals do we need to recruit into this profession? Because the profession has changed. It's a lot less law enforcement and a lot more social services than it ever was. So I think that one of the things IACP has been calling for the last 20 years is the National Commission on Criminal Justice. And we haven't had a commission since the Johnson Commission of 1967. And what we're saying is that to anybody that will listen to us, these aren't just law enforcement issues. These are issues related to whether it's the court system, whether it's the defense bar, whether it's the prosecution, juvenile justice, sentencing reform. I mean, all those issues need to be on the table. And, quite frankly, when you look at what came out of the Johnson Commission, there were 200 recommendations. That's where we got, the Law Enforcement Assistant Act from. That's where we got 911 came from there. It revolutionized our profession. And quite frankly, I think that that's where we need to go now, is to have another commission. We almost had one under the Obama administration. It can be done through an executive order by the president. We would clearly like to see Congress take it up and Congress pass it. But we think that really is the next logical step to look at the profession. And as you mentioned in your question to me, because it is about, the policies, what policies need to be put in place, what legislation needs to be passed, what training do we need, what kind of technology do we need, how are we going to deal with the issue of encryption and going dark. That's one of the issues that came up during the listening tour last year, and people talk about, the terrorism aspect of going dark. That, quite frankly, that's not going to carry the day. What's going to carry the day are local law enforcement not having access to these devices so that they can investigate appropriately, whether it's a kidnapping, whether it's drug cases, whether it's overdose cases, whether it's a fatal car accident. That's what's going to carry the day. So, but these are conversations that we need to continue to have, and we think the appropriate place to have them is through a National Commission on Criminal Justice.
Super thorough, and that is definitely something that would hopefully help with the challenges that are before the law enforcement profession, because as you just stated, even just some of them, any one in of itself would be enough of a challenge. But with all of them, what do you see as a means for the boots on the ground to, so to speak, to continue to meet these challenges and to perform in their respective roles?
Sure. So, Dennis, what I found was really interesting was when you look at the Gallup poll on confidence in law enforcement as an institution, we usually poll in the top three. Number one is usually the U.S. military. Number two is usually small business. And number three is policing. And we maintain that third spot. And if you look at the whole spectrum, you've got Congress polling at like 14%, and you've got media polling at probably like 4% in confidence in them as an institution. Yet last year, over the last 2 years, ever since Ferguson, we maintained that third position. However, the percentage of people who had confidence in law enforcement dropped precipitously. I think we dropped from around 62% to about 52%. And that's that's overall. And then if you look at the minority community, clearly they have much less confidence in law enforcement. And so this past year in November, most people don't know, the most recent Gallup poll, policing as a profession, law enforcement was actually polling back up at, I think it was 79%, which is the highest we've been since the late 60s. So what we need to tell our officers, who right now, quite frankly, are demoralized, are having a hard time going out there doing their job every day because they think that this vocal minority are the ones that are speaking for everyone, and they don't. If you really look, people support their police departments and people support their police officers. And we need to continue to tell the folks out there that are out there doing the job every single day that we understand it's a very, very difficult job. We understand the demands are incredible. We understand that this cumulative effect of stress and trauma that they get going from call to call to call can actually have an effect on how they make decisions. And we need to make sure that they're taken care of, but we need to make sure they understand that generally that the folks out there appreciate what they're doing. And
with that, in the best interest is to continue that community-oriented policing philosophy in every department, and to build relationships and to continue to put the efforts forth so that the job and the challenges can be met. And it's going to be a group effort, I think, like you said, from everyone, not just the police, but a complete partnership within society so that we can all meet these challenges.
I think when you look at it and you go back to Sir Robert Peel and you look at what he talked about, what was important, that the police of the community and the community of the police, and we got to get back to our Peelian roots.
Right.
It's clear that we need to continue to make sure that I can't say it enough that our officers are supported. Tie goes to the runner when it comes to the cops out there in the street. They got a very, very difficult job to do, but we still need to hold them accountable. But I think that even if you talk to the co-chairs from the task force report, so whether it's Laurie Robinson or Chuck Ramsey, they would tell you that 90-day window that they had to actually work on, the pillars that are really important to our foundation in policing, just wasn't enough time for them. That's why they also support our National Commission on Criminal Justice. And one of the things that I just recently was with Commissioner Ramsey, and we had this discussion, and he said one of the things that they talked about but they just couldn't get into was this recruitment and retention piece and how important it is to us as a profession if we're going to survive, to be quite honest with you, and be successful. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And as we start to see technology changes, and people are saying, well, technology can replace a lot of the cops out there in the street, it's just not going to happen.
It's the human interaction that's really going to always be
exactly what it is.
And I think that the technology and all the other advances are supports and things that can help with the profession, but you can never even consider removing that human element, because that's really the foundational aspect of policing. And even though Robert Peel put his 9 principles out in 1829, I think they're as true today.
Very good.
And I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
So I want to thank Deputy Executive Director Terrence Cunningham, again from the IACP. Hope that the listeners got to enjoy this audio podcast. And if they want to find out more or follow you, is there any mechanism they can do so?
Oh, sure. I mean, if they want to contact me directly, it's Cunningham@theiacp.org. And I am on Twitter on Wellesley Chief. So appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, Dennis.
Thank you.